Thank you all for coming in this morning. I appreciate it. And I'm always flattered when anyone will read what I write or come hear what I say. Uh, Thank you, because I am coming to you from the eighth floor of the Hathaway Tower here in Richmond, Virginia. I can look out over downtown Richmond, and it's a lovely day here. I hope it is in High Point. Uh, I am looking at our business today. We're supposed to call this state of the industry. Our state of the industry is perplexed. I think these are some of the most challenging days a furniture retailer has ever faced. There are so many issues. If you just had the inflation, wouldn't that be enough? And if you just had the COVID situation, wouldn't that be enough? And then there's a labor shortage, which is certainly more than enough. And in many ways, there's a product shortage. I think you'll find this market to help with that. But and then there's the war. And I don't think many of us really appreciate how distracting that war can be. It's distressing. And if I may say, the media sounds like they're trying to talk another war into coming, because evidently they need something to talk about. It's just frustrating to me, because the war is just a distraction. It's bothersome. So there's so many things that you have to address, but the underlying economic picture is better than I think most of us appreciate. No one should have to read as many economic reports as I do, as many government publications as I do. I think it could be ruled unfair to make anybody do that. But in some way, I need to look and see if the forecasts that I'm reading and that the reports that I'm seeing are accurate and that are unbiased. Bias today is everywhere. And you used to be able to look at these economic forecasts and see different opinions. Now you kind of have to look at who wrote it, who they're working for, if they're related to a political party, to find out whether or not the forecast can be trusted. And so we rely on a few that we have a lot of confidence in. And there are now more people claiming we're facing a recession than we've seen in probably 10 years. And they've got all these good reasons I just mentioned why we're going to have a recession. The core within our economy is still growing. It's not growing as fast as it did last year. It's not growing as much as it did in the first quarter, but it's growing. The housing business, which is so important to us, is growing. There are issues there, primarily the rising mortgage rate. And the mortgage rate's already over 4%. Now, it was 3.25% at the end of the year, and it had touched on 2.75% at one time, but not for long. If you blinked, you missed it. But anybody that's over 40 remembers when a 4% mortgage was a steal. I can remember 11.75% mortgages. They weren't pretty, but they got us a house. And it really was an unusual time back then. That was 1982, when at one time we had a 22% prime lending rate. Not that that's an important number, except when you realize that most states at that time had an 18% usury rate, which meant that you couldn't lend to the consumer for over 18%. Well, if you're borrowing at 22%, the incentive to lend at 18% isn't real strong. So we ended up not with a lack of availability of credit. Well, today we've got credit. We've got ample credit. I think you're going to see a little tightening up in the mortgage rates, mortgage lending, only because I'm not sure that the banks don't see a higher rate coming, and they don't want to lock in but so much at these rates. So that might tighten up a bit. But what's offsetting that is a lot of the consumers today have better finances than they have for a long time. Now, I read an article recently, I'm sure a lot of you did too, that the average consumer works from paycheck to paycheck. I can relate to that. And the average consumer has less than $600 in the bank. But I think that's not the consumer we're going after. And if you look at the statistics, a lot of those can be very misleading, but we are a country where there's a minority universe that's out there that owns most of the stocks, and they own most of the big houses, but they're also the sources of capital to start businesses and to fund the banks and to do the things that are necessary to make the money available to the rest of us and to provide the employment for the rest of us. So don't fault a wealthy person because they just bought a new yacht. They also probably are helping the economy in other ways. Plus, those poor yacht builders probably needed the help. And yachts also need furniture, by the way. The demand for our products are pretty good. We had this explosion of growth right after the COVID mess. And that began in May of 2020. And the growth has continued. And the demand continues today. We have not met 25% of the demand so far that was not met from the decade before. I think that needs to be remembered because sadly, we are a product that can be put off. Ugly is not a reason to replace a sofa. It was ugly before you determined it was ugly. That was a change in you. Chest of drawers, there isn't a lot that can go wrong with chest of drawers other than you get tired of looking at them. A drawer can stick, something like that. We used to have a basset hound, my wife and I, that loved the taste of certain kinds of furniture. And to say how old this was, my wife and I had just gotten married. We have now been married 52 years. So this was a while ago. But we bought a jackknife sofa. And for those of y'all who don't remember, it was a sofa. You grabbed the back, you pulled it forward, it released a spring, you dropped it down, and it was a flat sleeping surface. And it still had the arms on either end. Our basset hound thought that sofa was the tastiest thing it's ever had. And it chewed the arms off that sofa. It chewed part of the headboard off our bed. Now, I didn't know who made the bed, but I knew who made the sofa. And I talked to them one day and I asked them if they soaked the sofa in gravy or what. And they claimed not. But remember, if you sell furniture, encourage people to have pets. To sell additional furniture. Pets are also really beneficial towards selling more flooring, carpeting, rugs. So please encourage pets and children, or for that matter, divorce. Because if a family gets divorced, they both can't take the furniture. So just keep that in mind. That's don't discourage divorce. I've got some friends who have encouraged divorce their entire life. But our business is dependent upon mobility. And with the job creation that's going on now and the lack of employees in different areas, there's more of qualified workers moving from region to region than we've seen for decades. So what that means as a retailer, you need to make a serious effort towards looking at who's coming into town. And you have to do that through advertising and through having a contact with the realtor community, with the churches and synagogues, and other retailers, because that's who you're going after. Some people tell me, well, we don't need to run any more advertising. People know who we are. If I just moved to your town from Richmond, Virginia, I don't know who you are. Well, I might, but most people wouldn't. And if I haven't driven by your store a lot, I don't know where your store is. So putting an ad out there that doesn't have your address in it, that doesn't have your phone number in it, is probably not a good idea. And I'm talking your radio ads, your TV ads, your print ads, your internet communications all need to have that kind of information, because hopefully people that don't know you are looking at your communications. Now, another thing that bothers me, and it's gotten worse during the last 2 years, is I think somewhere along the line during COVID, we've gotten a lot more casual. It's certainly true in men's apparel. I don't know who is the biggest seller of ties in the world, but they're suffering right now, okay? Men aren't wearing ties like they used to in offices. And I'm talking at banks and other organizations. I still like ties. When I was at the University of Virginia, we had to wear a tie every day to class, as hard as that is for anybody to believe. A long time ago, far, far away. But we're not wearing ties like we used to. We're not dressing as formally as we used to. Jeans have apparently become acceptable almost everywhere. Now, that wasn't true a decade ago. That wasn't true 2 decades ago. But in addition to getting more casual, as I'm looking at a lot of stores, I'm finding that they're not doing as good a job of visual maintenance as they have in the past. And if you pull up to a store and you don't like what it looks like on the outside, you're not going in. And so I think that we need to prepare ourselves for visitors. And that has gotten a little loosey during this recession, or during this COVID. Is COVID going to be over anytime soon? I don't think so. I think it's with us. I think it's with us for a long time. Look what's going on in China right now. China, where all this mess started, is shutting down Shanghai's 26 districts one at a time. Shenzhen is already shut down. A number of the ports are slowing down. So we're looking at them having more difficulty sourcing, getting product to us. Again, because of it. Vietnam, in the third quarter of last year, was virtually shut down. Their factories closed, and they couldn't get product to us. So we're looking at our different source nations. And I'm hearing that the logistics at the ports, which are not getting better, we want to think they're getting better. They're not getting better. The major ports, which are the problem areas, are still slow. They're still running at max levels. and they cannot seem to create enough space to allow containers to come in and the empty containers to go out. Now, the container situation is very difficult, and there's a lot of product waiting in Asia to get over here if they can find the containers. We've got a fair number of containers here we would love to ship back to them if the ships would take them. But the other problem is that right after World War II, we started using Liberty ships because they were cheap and they were well built. And in the 50s and 60s, Liberty ships were the dominant way of shipping over the oceans. The container system began in 1964. And back then, the container ships averaged somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 containers per ship. Right now, the largest container ship can hold 19,000 containers. You've seen pictures of them. They look very overburdened. And the sad thing is, we have almost 800 ports that can at least accept a container, but we don't have but 5 that can accept a container ship with 15 that holds 15,000 containers. And that's where a lot of this congestion comes in, is because we book on the most efficient ship, which is the big ones, and they can't get to any port but those 5. And so if you're shipping into Los Angeles, Long Beach, Miami, New York, or New Jersey, they're the ones who are all booked up. And if you look at Costco right now, who's just leased 7 more ships to go with the 3 they leased right around December to help themselves out, they're taking them into the port of Houston and the port, a port in Washington State. If you look at Walmart, Walmart uses New Orleans and Houston as their primary sources. We're now seeing where people are bringing additional product into Savannah and Wilmington on the East Coast in a great way. So we're getting around this. And some of the smaller vendors, I use the word vendor because they can either be an exhibitor, they can be an importer or a manufacturer, a vendor. Well, if they're bringing product in, a lot of them aren't having any problems because they're bringing them into smaller ports. So think about that as you go around and look at the showrooms here. I wish I was there. These markets are like a reunion for me. I've been going there since the early 70s. And having gone as many times as I have, there's still little nooks and crannies around High Point that I haven't been through yet. So I don't know how you get through as much space as we have there, over 2 million square feet. But please don't go the same places you've always gone. There are too many new vendors, too many new exhibitors that have been formed since the COVID began because they saw opportunities in the marketplace, either in product or in price point or in availability. If you're not getting product on time, shop somewhere else. They might be able to help you. If you're dealing with just the largest of the large, and you're not the largest of the large, look at the other 2,000 exhibitors there who are there and probably can do a better job of servicing you. But back at the economy, we think we're going to see the year end up with growth around 3% overall. And retail will grow between 5 and 6% overall. The consumer has credit to support that. We certainly will have the availability to do that. That's still not the pace we had last year, but it's a decent pace for us and a very decent pace for us over the last decade. Is inflation coming down? No. Inflation's going up for the near term. In fact, the inflation numbers that were reported day before yesterday were a shock to the system because they were higher, not lower. Although some government officials said they would be trending down, a government official was wrong. Think about that for a minute. They were wrong again. I remember last summer when we were being told there wasn't an inflation problem. And I had to look around and find someone who wasn't laughing. We're paying more for gas here. We're paying more for everything. If you can think of something that's going down in price other than leather, let me know. But leather prices are coming down for lots of reasons, not the least of which is that we're eating more beef. Now I'll let you follow the track between our eating more beef and leather, but there's a greater supply of leather today than there's been in a long time. So the leather prices are going down. The population mix that we have today is extremely favorable to us. And that is young people. And the people in our economy that buy furniture, real furniture, like you sell in your store, not IKEA type furniture, not a lot of the RTA, more transportable furniture, real sit down in furniture, recliners, and real dining tables, and so forth, are between the ages of 35 and 54. That's absolutely our sweet spot. And our population has been growing in that group since 2017. And every year until the year 2034, we're going to see substantial year by year growth in the prime age group we're going after. So between the mobility, the job creation that's in different places, and the growth in the core population. Now, a lot of times you see people talk about population growth, and they're talking about births, and that's a forecast. This isn't a forecast. These people are alive and well and walking around. And so we can see them coming. We know they're coming. And like I always like to point out, the young people today aren't like my generation, thank heavens. In today's population, in today's academics, women are the superstars. Women are getting over 60% of the college degrees. They're getting over 65% of the graduate degrees. What does that tell you about what's coming up over the next 10, 20, and 30 years? I was on an admissions committee for the College of William and Mary for a while. I got my graduate degree at William and Mary. And what I learned there was a real shock. They got almost 2.5 times as many admission requests at William and Mary from women as they did from men. And so if you don't want to have a school that's 3/4 women and 1/4 men, you raise the standard for women and lower the standard for men. I thought that was horrible. When I first learned that, I just thought that was hideous. One, because I had a daughter who was looking to get to college, but the other reason I just thought it was hideous. But if you think about that for a minute, it concerned me because there's like a 72% chance that your child will meet their future spouse while they're in college age. And they will live within 74 or 75 miles of where they went to college. Those are just statistical truisms. So always support your local colleges, number one, if you're a furniture retailer. But think about that for a minute. So by definition, if my daughter went to that particular college and met her future spouse, almost by definition, her spouse would be dumber than she is. Does that sound appealing to you? No, but that's the way it is in more and more schools, because women are academically going after those degrees because they see the benefit. The other group that's benefiting is minorities of all types. People from Asia, people from Europe, all want to come here and take advantage of our educational system. And our educational system, in terms of colleges and all, are still cheaper than almost anywhere in the world. And they're good. And they have a great global reputation. So remember that in terms of your consumers going forward, because with more minorities and women getting those degrees and getting that opportunity going forward, they're going to revolutionize who buys what, who has the ability to buy. If a household now has got two well-educated breadwinners, look at what that does to their ability to advance earlier, buy a home earlier, have kids earlier. It's pretty exciting, actually, when you look at the demographics, the spending power, and the timeline. Although people are waiting longer to get married. When my wife and I got married, I think I was 21 and she was 20. And I'd say that's about average in Virginia. Of course, there's a proportion of people who get married at 14, but they're not big anymore. But we were about average. And our daughter was born when my wife was 27, I believe. And so we started about on average and had a son 6 years later. So that's kind of the normal way you do things. We bought our first home after we'd been married about 4 years, and we were blessed in finding a home. Actually, my sister found it for me. And then we sold it in a short while, made enough to buy a nicer home, and then made money on that and bought a nicer home yet in a great school district. So that's kind of the way I was taught you do it. And business-wise, I've been very blessed to work for some good companies and to have some great partners after we started our firm in 1991. So, that's the American dream. I'm going to make one statement to you that I have learned to be true. You will never be paid what you're worth working for someone else. I always heard that my whole career. And now that I own my own business, I have learned, yeah, that's pretty much true. It's nice to be able to pay yourself what you can. Now, back in the furniture industry. There's a lot of talk today about used furniture. We don't call it that anymore. We don't even call it by the flowery term antiques. And we used to say an antique was anything that was 25 years or older in furniture terms. These days, it's recycled furniture, which has a lot more consumer-friendly sound to it. Ladies and gentlemen, in some towns today, especially big cities, they're selling recycled mattresses. You don't want to know, okay? But it meets the price point. but trust me, you don't want how they're recycled. But recycled furniture is now hot. It's hot on Wall Street. There are a number of companies that do it and do it very well. Some are just selling well-known designs. Others are selling whatever looks good. And that's fine. We've always had an aftermarket for our product. But what I'm looking at now is new materials, some really exciting new designs, and a lot of changes in functionality. It's really difficult today to make an argument to buy a bookcase when a lot of people don't buy books anymore. It's also difficult to make an argument for a chest of drawers, which were constructed so that you could put your folded furniture, your folded clothes in them at a time when no one irons and folds their clothes anymore. Technology has changed. Our furniture, by and large, hasn't. But I look at the mattress industry. The mattresses that are being served today, they're being sold, and the technology that's going into those mattresses is dramatically better than we've ever had before. And part of it's because we've got more research into sleep and what's required in sleep. But you got to realize mattresses are different than furniture. Every mattress is a rectangular square, a rectangle, and they're all the same size rectangle. And it doesn't make any difference what the cover is because over 90% of those covers are covered by sheets anyway. And the product is a completely blind product. The consumer doesn't have a clue what's inside that mattress. It's what you tell them it is. And so the improvements that we're making in our mattresses are really important to keep the consumer buying our mattresses, understanding our mattresses, and appreciating these strengths going forward. So let's just talk about what we're facing. Labor is going to get easier as the year progresses. And that's simply because we don't have any artificial incentives out in the current economy, no artificial giveaways that are going to allow people to take that money and stay home. Some of the other incentives that have been out there are also running out. And so those people will need to work to have incomes. It's going to get better every month this year in terms of the number of people looking for jobs. We have an unemployment rate right now of 3.8%. Do you believe that? No, that's a government fiction that's been put together that does not include people that are certainly able to work but don't want to. If you look at the people that are available to work, it's about 13% of the population. And we just have to make the job comfortable for them and make it so that they need money, and they do. Finance, people ignore the fact that we still sell well over 60% of all furniture and mattress products on credit. And so we need that credit. We have the most availability of credit right now that we've ever had, and new ways of getting credit. And one way we've got, when people say, well, how can it be different credit? Well, we used to do credit through the banks or the credit and loans. Now you've got private equity funds out there that are funding consumer debt programs because they can borrow very cheaply and they can lend it at typical lending rates. And that's a very attractive return. That's a whole new fund out there of money to finance consumer purchases. And they finance typically home furnishings and automobiles. So that's their target market. They want us to sell. So that's good for us. I think more consumers today are opening new businesses than we've seen in a long time. And we can certainly see it in home furnishings. The designer community in the home furnishings business is huge and growing. They probably represent 40 or 50% of the attendees at the High Point Market today. They represent between 10 and 15% of the actual dollar volume done. But they're a growing market because consumers, as they get into working more, just don't have the time that they used to be able to decorate. And that's a shame because decorating your home should be a lot of fun. You should get together with friends and neighbors. And when you decorate your home, you ought to have a party and have folks over and show it off because it's one of the true reflections of you. Now, having said that, looking around my very messy office, I hope no one sees this and says this represents me, but it really does. Anyway, it's an exciting something. So the COVID, you need to learn to live with. The war, I would love to think that there's going to be a solution. I'm not sure that the United States can flex its muscles enough to ensure a solution. But for all the people who are involved, I hope there's a solution, and I hope it comes soon. I also know that there's a pretty good chance that the United States will end up paying to repair the country in the future. We always have. The logistical situation at our ports and the expense we're paying to get containers here from overseas is frightening. It's adding so much cost to our merchandise, if and when we can get it, that it has caused countless number of problems. It's going to force, I think, less globalization. And I think we're going to see a small, gradual movement towards domestic sourcing because the domestic manufacturers do have an advantage both in terms of cost in many ways and in terms of time. They don't have to wait for it to come from so far away. The other factor in this is that a lot of the offshore markets that have been shipping to the United States have got a growing and prosperous domestic population that wants more and more of what they're producing and shipping outside of their countries, they want inside their countries. That's true in Eastern Europe, it's true in Asia, but still, there is a huge amount of furniture that comes through our ports. Right now, about 88% of all wood furniture comes from outside the US. 88%. Now, a growing proportion of that is coming from Mexico. Canada's been pretty stable. Vietnam's been the fastest growing. And China, thanks to the anti-dumping petition, can make all kinds of wood furniture except bedroom. They can't make bedroom. So we're reliant when it comes to bedroom and all sorts, child's bedrooms, adult bedrooms. That's the biggest source of that right now is Vietnam. So we have a shortage of bedroom furniture out there right now because Vietnam had a number of shutdowns in the last 6 months. So bedroom's a little tougher to find. Upholstered furniture is a completely different animal. About 55% is made domestically and 45% is imported. But I don't know if you've ever thought about it this way. It's so very obvious. We have two completely different upholstery markets in the US. We have upholstery that is made and sold, and upholstery that is sold and then made. The mass-produced upholstery is made, the retailer buys it in quantities, puts it in their distribution center, runs the ads, and sells it. These days, a lot of that comes from overseas. The Asian manufacturers in particular like to make long production runs of like items. The other upholstery that is sold and then made most often is customized in some way. Pennsylvania House used to have a little placard that had 24 different options that you could do on every one of their sofas. 24 options. And of course, it related to the skirting, the welting, the feet, the whether you want polyfill or down, all these different things that you could have customized to that sofa. You could have a sofa that no one else in the United States has. It might be incredibly ugly, but you could have it. And that custom market is still very strong today. And it's one of the reasons that we need a strong and vibrant designer community. Otherwise, American consumers will be bringing in sofas with horizontal stripes and all these interesting adaptations. I'm telling you that this custom side of our upholstery business is strong and growing. In metal furniture, well over 90% is imported, mainly because our regulations here in the US no longer allow us to do much plating and that kind of metal work. Mattresses, it's less than 20% are imported, again, largely because of anti-dumping petitions, but it keeps moving around if you look at the import statistics, which brings to another point. I publish a quarterly digest, Furnishings Digest now. I used to do it by the month, but I'm getting old. And quarterly sounds really nice to me now, as opposed to monthly. So we're putting this thing out. I think Caprice is going to get your email address. If she doesn't, write to, if you've got a pencil or whatever, research at maeltd.com. And we'll get them to you free of charge every quarter when they come out. The most recent one has the import statistics for the third and fourth quarter of last year. And if you go through those, you will be shocked at how strong some countries are and how some countries have just fallen off the map because of a lot of different reasons. Fascinating reasons. It's fun to watch. This year, sales are going to be up in furniture and mattresses, somewhere in the range of 4 to 6%. I agree with the National Retail Federation on that. And after inflation, it's going to be up 1 or 2%. Now, I don't think we're going to see inflation be as strong as it has been in furniture and mattresses, only because it got so obscenely strong last year. And some corrective measures are being taken that are going to make more containers available, make shipping a little more affordable. So I'm hoping that side of the cost will come down some as the year progresses. The port problem is not going away. I don't think it'll go away this year or next because it's too big and imports have become too important. And some industries are more reliant upon imports than we are. Inflation, I think, is going to come down because it got so obscenely high last year, and a lot of that's still passing through. I wish I could tell you gas prices are coming down, but I doubt it. I'm going to stop here and just ask if you have any questions for me, please. Yes, sir.
Jerry, do you see housing prices similar to where we were in 2008, where we've been overpaying for homes because interest rates are so low, and once the interest rates go up, will we see a decline in housing prices?
I think we're going to see a real leveling out in existing home prices. No question. We're going to see higher prices on newly built homes driven primarily by the raw materials. If you go back to 2008 and 2009, we had a period of time where we had spent almost a decade trying to get people to buy homes that couldn't afford them. And we had a lot of foreclosures, and that flooded the market. And it also put some banks out of business. We don't have that same situation right now. Now, we've got some overextended consumers, no question, but we don't have anything like what we had back then. It's just, we don't have the housing bubble that they've got in some other countries. The prices that are paid, yeah, they're obscene, but they're getting, a lot of the people who are selling one home and moving into another are benefiting on one side and moving that right over into the next side. The other thing you got to realize about homes is moving from a $300,000 home into a $400,000 home. If you've been in the $300,000 home for more than 5 years, you've paid off some of the mortgage. And if you remember, you put down a 20% down payment or whatever when you bought it. When you move into your next home, not all the money goes into the down payment, and it frees up money. The statistics are kept by the National Association of Realtors, and they're meaningful. And the last time I looked was the average person that sold a home, moved into another home, ended up with around $20,000 of freed up capital. And since they just bought a new home, one of the highest priorities was decorating that new home. And that included landscaping and appliances and everything. But that's another reason housing helps us. Housing accounts for about 20% of all the furniture that's sold. We've proven it over and over again. When housing tumbles, we tumble. So I don't think housing's a problem right now. And the real safeguard there is the population mix. Whether you're talking about baby boomers who are moving out of our home we lived in for 31 years and moving into a condo like my wife and I did 5 years ago, or whether you're talking the young people today who are just beginning to have children or who have children who are just beginning to leave home. There are all these good reasons with large population segments that are driving the need for homes. There are regions of the country that people are leaving that are probably not going to have as good a housing market. But I can tell you about Richmond, Virginia, they're building homes around here at a record pace. And I think it's true in most of the South, to be honest. I'm very flattered that all of you would take your time to be here with me today. I'm very flattered that the Retail Association, Home Furnishing Association, has invited me to do this for roughly 30 years. Some mornings were 8 o'clock, believe it or not. I appreciate this more than I can possibly say. It's an honor. You folks are the heart of this. And to have you come and listen to somebody who sits in a tower and then tells everybody else what's going on, I appreciate it. So please go out there and have a good market. Don't go to the same people you always go to. Go in some new showrooms. And there really are a lot of great new things. I've seen some fascinating ads. I've seen names of companies I didn't know. But what's funny with a lot of these is it may be a new company name, but the people running it are folks I've known for years. So go look at those, see what they've got. And I'm excited for you to be able to have these days at market. I wish I could be there, and I hope I'll be with you next time. Thank you all so very much. Thank you. Thanks so much.